Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 174 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I am your co-host. I was going to say co-host. I guess I'm the only host today, Billy Bob, and I have my special guest, Christine Lynn. She is a historian and geopolitical analyst. She is streaming live from Colorado. So when I say good morning, I don't think it's morning. Oh, it probably is still morning. Is it 11:30 a.m. in Colorado, Christine?
10:30.
Only an hour's difference from West Coast time. So thank you so much, Christine, for joining me. We have today a title. It's called Trump's Red Scare. And our title today was a little bit preempted by this big breaking news about the 28-point, peace plan that, by all reports, was negotiated between the United States and Russia behind the scenes. And now Trump is allegedly trying to, get Ukraine to accept it. So that's the big breaking news. Everyone is talking about it, and we will definitely touch on that towards the end of the show. However, our primary topic for the day was, again, the title is Trump's Red Scare, and that is a reference to Trump's recent proclamation, and I have that here. It's his from November the 7th. He ordained Anti-Communism Week 2025, and he wrote a long anti-communist screed, and so we were going to talk about that. We were going to talk about the context within which this big anti-communist push is taking place. And I think, of course, it has two benefits for Trump. It has domestic politics. It benefits domestic politics because, of course, he's going to label, the Democrats as the communists. And then, ideologically, in the broader ideological discussion, it just really narrows, the acceptable discussion. So, he's appealing to this anti-communism, this indoctrinated anti-communism that has really been like a religion, since 1917. But I do have experts to talk about this, and so I know Christine Lynn, as a historian, she's got a lot of familiarity with history and previous Red Scares, previous, big anti-communist propaganda offensives. And so I would just like to ask her, could you just, Christine, could you broadly define Red Scare? I mean, what are we talking about here?
Well, certainly. And in regards to the proclamation that Trump made, Anti-Communism Week, I would like to say my first impressions when I read that proclamation was it struck me that when people read it, if you simply substitute the word capitalism wherever Trump used the word socialism or communism, then it becomes a completely true statement. And I was a little bit amused at it because he said things, I substituted capitalism. And I think he said something like, well, I say using capitalism is one of history's most destructive ideologies. And of course, he put in communism there. And he talked about how he called communism and socialism wreaking devastation upon nations and souls. And again, I thought of capitalism, wreaking devastation upon nations and souls. So when you read it in that context, it actually becomes a true statement. And of course, he spoke about the United States being founded on liberty. And it always reminds me of what Stalin said to Roy Howard. In that interview about what real liberty, and it exists only where there's no exploitation, where that's been abolished, where people aren't afraid of having unemployment and not enough to eat. And so, reading it as a Marxist, it was amusing, but reading it as an American and as a historian, I would have to say, yes, it completely denotes the idea of the beginnings of another Red Scare. And Red Scares, historically speaking, in the United States have been 2 times. And both times were used by the US government to use a lying narrative, targeting, of course, communism and socialist in the United States, in order to deceive the American people into supporting some action of the US military and the US government that perhaps Americans wouldn't otherwise. The first Red Scare, Billy Bob, was, of course, at the time of the Revolution, between 1917 and 1920. And a little known fact, a lot of Americans aren't aware, at that time, the United States, of course, vilifying communism, had sent about 13,000 troops and invaded Russia, invaded the Soviet Union. And they were actually responsible for atrocities committed with the whites, burning of villages. They were infamous. The whites were infamous for the atrocities they committed, and the Americans were also a part of that. The reasons given to Americans at the time were to disguise the fact that, again, the United States wanted an overthrow. And so they involved themselves in the Russian Civil War. This was before the armistice, a few months before the armistice had been signed. And during that time in the United States, they vilified the Bolsheviks to such a degree that they passed the Espionage and Sedition Acts. And under that, here in the United States, people were put into prison for simply speaking, for simply writing pamphlets, for having conversations. And the American people went with it because they were told as if the Bolsheviks' next goal would be to take over the United States. The second Red Scare in history that is recognized was between 1947 and 1957. Most people are very much aware of that. That's the time of Senator McCarthy and all of his blacklisting of people in education and entertainment business. It was also the time that, again, the hysteria against the Soviet Union, against the socialist communism that was there, put the Americans into such a frenzy and fear that they allowed laws such as the Smith Act. The Smith Act was enacted in 1940, and I think it's, such a mar to see what the United States, it was not overturned until 17 years later. During all of those 17 years, Americans, it was criminalized to simply teach Marxism. Your political beliefs, your political speech, but as a writer, your articles, your books, having meetings, just discussing Marxism and communism was made illegal. So, that is egregious. And it took 17 years until the Supreme Court ruled against it. All of this time, the Americans were the ones who suffered. And there was no threat to them militarily. But because they were willing to believe that and go into that panic, they allowed all this to happen, which brings us to what Trump is speaking about in that proclamation. And not just that proclamation, I would remind you. He has been speaking anti-socialism, communism for many years. There is a quote that I brought with me today that I wanted to share in particular in regards to, is this a Red Scare now? This is Trump at a rally in New Hampshire in 2023. Short quote. "We will root out the communist, Marxist, fascist, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country." That's Trump speaking just like Hitler, frankly, that language. Many people throw away that term, accuse people of fascism, Nazism, and Hitler. But that is dehumanizing language about people who simply hold a different belief and ideology. And the word vermin is something that no leader in the United States should be speaking of fellow Americans. So yes, I do believe that I and other historians do consider this the beginning of another Red Scare. And it is concerning because it's a buzzword. You say you're a communist or a socialist, certainly if you say you're a Marxist, most Americans have that knee-jerk reaction. They have been well indoctrinated. They're very ignorant willfully. And I feel that Trump is on such an ego trip that we may see persecution beginning, and it will be a matter of how far he tries to take it. I think he's a very dangerous man, and I think that people should pay attention to not only that proclamation, but numerous times his speech. We see what he's doing in America right now. Yesterday, the Democrats made a video, letting service people know of their constitutional obligation, really, that they can exact if they believe something is unlawful, unconstitutional. And then Trump comes out actually posing threats to our own lawmakers in the United States, calling them traitors and saying it calls for the death penalty. This rhetoric is very dangerous. It is reminiscent of the first two Red Scares, and it seems as if this is on his agenda.
I couldn't agree more. I don't know what to add to that, really, but definitely, there is this indoctrinated mindset that Trump is appealing to, and it has really nothing to do with reality. It has nothing to do with ideological reality or what the ideologies are. It's simply an effort to silence critics, really. And so I mean, if we consider that what we have is an oligarchy, what we have is a government that represents the wealthy elite ownership class, and Trump, again, is as the president, that's who he represents. Like, the ownership class has an ideology of capitalism and liberalism, and this ideology is threatened by the ideology of the working class, the ideology of socialism. And so it makes perfect sense that they want to demonize and silence socialists and lie about socialists and get people, the working class, the naive, credulous citizenry of this country, they want to get us to, have misunderstandings. They don't want us to have this clear understanding of what socialism is, what capitalism is, what liberalism is, and why socialism is progress, why socialism advocates for a government that represents the working class instead of a government that represents the ownership class. And so that's progress from the perspective of the working class, but from the perspective of the ownership class, progress is impossible. They have everything they want. This situation, this system could not be better for themselves. And so to them, socialism is regressive. And that's why they denounce it. And that's why they lie about it and malign it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, no, exactly. Like, how far will Trump take this? How much power will he have? How will he be enabled? That is really the question that will play out. It'll play itself out in the coming months and years. We're only 1 year into his presidency. Oh my God, that's a long time we have to go.
Yes, 2 points there. First of all, I feel that this focus, whenever he pulls out the buzzword of socialism and communism, is because he's a very fearful man. And certainly now, with the situation in the United States, both civilly, civically, economically, the last thing Trump wants people to do is to begin to question this system and to question, why does it take two people to working full time, not even able to raise their children and be there day in, day out when they're babies, because they need both working full time just to pay the mortgage. People so reliant, when we saw the government shutdown, so reliant upon the government program for food. What does that say about a country that operates that way? There's something very seriously wrong. There's limited opportunities here. There is a healthcare crisis, and we have crime, rampant crime. And we're at a point where a lot of people are either thinking about, they either acquiesce, but I think that there is an inherent part of Americans that do rebel when they get pushed to the limit. And he fears, because when socialists come in and share with them there is an alternative, he fears that people might start to question this capitalistic society. And of course, the bourgeois imperialists don't want that to be questioned. Second, I would also say, going back to the proclamation, he equated, as Western leaders have done for some time now, in the same spew of everyone that he rejected, socialist, communist, Marxist, he also included fascist. And of course, there's not more antagonistic ideologies in the world than communism and fascism. And yet Trump equates them. This is nothing new for the United States to do. And I feel that it is a technique to obfuscate not only the fascist past of the United States, and I am referring to World War II, despite them being a part of the Allies, they were strongly fascist and supported fascist Germany at the time and made a lot of profits. But also to make people distracted and not understand that right now the United States with Trump is really headed in that tyrannical fascist, not capitalist, merely capitalist, but that endpoint of imperialism into, we got the expansionist ideology of fascism. He wants to really merge the state power with the corporate power. This goes far beyond capitalism. This goes into fascism. So what does he do to make people never question it? He puts communism and fascism in the same category. And of course, they are diametrically opposed. Again, it appeals to Americans' emotionalism and their indoctrination. Trump never wants people to question the status quo, their suffering, the working people's suffering. He wants to demonize the only true alternative, which is socialism, communism, so that they will never even listen to us. But I think the more they begin to suffer, well, that gives us the ability to communicate it. But that proclamation is dangerous, especially if he tries to act upon it, as has happened in our past before with very anti-constitutional laws. We will see what happens.
Yeah, that equation, fascism with communism, is rampant on social media. I encounter it often, and it's relatively new because, as we were fighting World War II, of course, it didn't exist. People understood that these were opposites. But the Cold War, especially once the Cold War ended, I think they really started, changing history and changing, trying to, do a new propaganda where, it's authoritarianism, and fascism and communism but they're both authoritarianism. There's no different. And so they have this axis, volunteerism versus authoritarianism. And again, this is just another mindless deviation from objective reality, material reality, which it involves actual economic relationships and how do people relate to the means of production. That's the fundamental material basis for reality. But they create this entire ideology. It's idealism, where it's just this axis of authoritarianism and volunteerism. And we want volunteerism. Capitalism is just volunteerism, Christine. That's all it is. Capitalism is just voluntary, and socialism is authoritarian. What more do you need to know? So they just, they fill people's minds with mindless nonsense, and that's what passes for discourse on social media, as I have noticed this morning, and for the past 20 years. So we have a delay, and we're trying to. Go ahead, Christine. If you had something to say,
Yes, we do have a little bit of a delay there, so we will cope with it. I find it interesting that Trump, he's always attacking in his aggression. But now we see, just like what he spoke against the video the Democrats made. Anyone who questions Trump, anyone who opposes him, even people who supported him, like we saw with Marjorie Taylor Greene, he comes out with the word traitor. But these words have definitions. She's not a traitor. And the Democratic lawmakers who made that video, talking to people in the military about unlawful orders, they're not traitors. They're simply sharing the facts as they are in the United States. But again, I go back to he's a very fearful man, and that makes him very dangerous. Anyone who challenges him, questions him whatsoever, suddenly becomes a traitor. But of course, under our law, that is a very powerful word. And as he likes to throw around, worthy of the death penalty. What kind of man do we have as president? I frankly believe that if you had Trump one-on-one and a reporter were to ask him when he least expected, could you define communism? Could you define socialism? Could you define Marxism? Frankly, could you define fascism or even capitalism? I don't think that the man could define any of them. That's what we've got as a president. And it also is the American people. They have been given this false, lying narrative about socialism, communism, and number two, true socialism, true Marxism, and communism with these, quote, social democrats, the various lawmakers with it, when, of course, as you and I know, they're very far away from actual socialism. But it is enough. Even the recent election of Mandami in New York, which seemed to really whatever good comes from that, who knows? I mean, that's for the people in New York City to decide. But again, he uses the buzzwords. And what happened there? Who he endorsed lost. And he doesn't want people, even someone like that, who is not like us by any means, but still questioning the status quo. Whatever his quote answers are, whatever, that's for them to deal with. But he doesn't want Americans to see that there's any alternative to tyrannical, imperialistic capitalism as now exists. But you know what? I think the Americans are seeing through it. We've gone through ages as we grew up about the American dream. And I'm telling you, Billy Bob, right now, the American dream is to leave the United States. That's the American dream, is to leave. And I think a lot of people are realizing that.
Yeah, I know. I personally spend a lot of my free time at work searching for retirement destinations, outside of the country. Part of that is to, because the U.S. dollar typically will go farther. But also, there's it's, our culture. It's problematic and it's poisonous. And we just deal with incredible problems and issues that really other countries don't have to deal with. And I think part of that has to do with the degree to which we embrace this capitalism is good and socialism is evil nonsense. You had a lot of great commentary, and I had a couple of thoughts, which of course had escaped me by the time I start talking. I was thinking about Trump and just how he's such a useful tool for the ruling oligarchy, because they can get him, they can pressure him and force him. I don't know about force, but I mean, they can definitely manipulate him into doing things that they're going to pretend they don't want to have done. Things that are going to cause pain and sacrifice to the American people unnecessarily. And then they can run against that and have this fake opposition saying, hey, Trump was awful. But all the while, they're very happy with what Trump is doing because it benefits their interests. And it pushes the pain onto the working class. And then it allows them, like I said, to have this fake oppositional front, which can, at the next election, sweep into power saying how bad Trump was. And it's just a game. It's, it's political theater because there's only one party, and it's the ruling oligarch class. And sure, they divide themselves up. They have factions. They have different strategies, they have different agendas, but they have alignment on all the big questions. I mean, imperialism, yes. Capitalism, exploitation, yes. Exploiting the world to the maximum extent, exploiting workers, even U.S. citizens, yes. So I mean, and then it's like representative government, a government that represents the working class. Hell no, they don't want that. So Christine, right now I am just seeing black, and so it looks like we're having some Wi-Fi difficulties, and it might be me. It could be your Wi-Fi, but so I'm not sure if viewers are seeing me or seeing you. I know on my screen I just see me. Yeah, most unfortunate with these technical issues.
Well, we'll just continue speaking as long as they can hear us. I'd have to say excellent analysis and points, Billy Bob. And that is what it gets the core to. And until Americans begin to see that it's not in the United States left and right, Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberals, radical liberal, all of this terminology is used, as you very well said, by all of them. Use that, come the election times, and it keeps this entire scam on the American people going, because they don't question. If they think that their political party is the answer, they continue in these meaningless battles over relatively trivial differences.
Yeah.
Because the things that bind us together go beyond all their cultural pinpoints of their differences, because like you said, they sit back and smile, wink at each other. We are raking in the money, we are raking in the hegemony worldwide, and stealing others' resources, and the American people never question that. And as long as they think the answer is between left and right, Republican and Democrat, they will fail to ever question and change and potentially change this system. And again, it goes back to Trump's fear, as well as the Democrats. And they both benefit from their little debates and conflicts, because nobody questions that all of them are making money off the blood of thousands of people around the world and off the oppression of the working people of the United States. You very well said that. I do believe that it may be when the suffering gets to such a degree here, and perhaps even as American hegemony, I certainly pray and hope for it to collapse in terms of its hegemonic control. If the problems at home domestically get so bad, and Americans also are expressing their rejection of this, then the U.S. government and the Pentagon have problems to deal with here, rather than being able to exact their evil worldwide. I don't know, but I think a lot of people are becoming unhappy with everything here, and I believe it's only going to get worse. And for me, that's a good thing. I actually feel it is about time, politically, geopolitically, and spiritually, that those repercussions come to the Americans, because they are responsible for so much suffering worldwide, and they've been blessed to be protected from it with their two oceans. Those oceans do nothing for their protection now. And if Trump continues to be the world bully, he's going to find that maybe the Americans aren't happy when American military start dying for nothing but profits. And we see the host system that's happened in Vietnam. I mean, that was an extreme example. But I just hope Americans do begin to question this duopoly and realize that's not the answer. But that is what the oligarchs fear.
And I agree with you that the material conditions of, the domestic citizenry really has to change, if we're going to get some opinions changed, and if we're going to get people really trying to figure out what's going on. because history has shown that the ruling class's ability to placate the working class with even a modicum of crumbs, from their elaborate feast, just dropping a few crumbs is enough to keep people from not being revolutionary. And so, Marx at first, was certain that it's going to be these most industrialized countries, the most advanced countries, where the revolution will happen first. And, towards the end of his life, I think he began to realize that maybe the opposite was more true. But at first, he definitely did not appreciate the degree to which the oligarchs can placate and, if not divide and conquer the working class in order to maintain, their oligarchy. But it's definitely that's what their fear is, that their global hegemony is on the decline, and that that'll result in material conditions changing for the negative, and that'll cause people to start really asking questions, tuning in, and caring. Whereas they don't have to otherwise, and they haven't had to otherwise. They've had the luxury of plugging into Hollywood, plugging into the NFL or sports, and just living their lives carelessly without ever worrying about what's actually going on. And so that luxury might come to an end if the material conditions change enough.
Yes, indeed. And I'll go back to something that you shared, that you are exploring, researching, looking forward to the anticipation of your retirement, and looking at other places in the world that might be better. And I would encourage your viewers who are in a situation, and it doesn't take much, to look into that. And even if you're not near retirement is a good time, but even younger, and even if you're a young couple planning your life, maybe you're reluctant to have a child living in this society, if you can call it a society, hardly, the semblance of a society at this time. And when you look forward, you see things are only getting worse here. What do you have to look forward to? We're talking about debating food and health care. These are not matters that you have to think about in a considerable number of other countries. And I would really support your continued research, but your viewers. There's many Americans right now who have already made that decision, or even in this year, next year, are actually planning that. And it is becoming, really, as I said, the American dream to leave this country. For those who feel they can't, maybe they have grandchildren here and they don't want to part ways, then I would say stop participating in that whole process, because as long as you participate and debate and waste your mind and your heart debating Democrat versus Republican points, you're missing the critical point, that they are using you, they are exploiting you, and you shouldn't even play a part in it. And I've heard people get very disturbed when you say something like that, but it's for each of us. But it is meaningless, and it validates their system. And it is certainly one thing, living under this oppression, that you can do is not engage in it. You have better things to do, which is to take care of yourself, your family, your development, and leave the politics of the United States behind, and look at a much wider field, both for yourself personally and for what's going on in this world. For us, as Marxists, as communists, educate yourself. I remember Lenin was in one of his books stating about, I think it was one of the books for the youth, that it does not serve the cause unless you are really, truly educated in it, because it's not a matter of simply being aware of it yourself. It is not aware of just simply telling the oppressed Americans, our brothers and sisters, our fellow Americans, hey, you're oppressed, they're exploiting you, look at how many hours you work, look at what you have to pay for health care. It's not enough to just tell them that, but you have to have such a step, I would say, emotionally and spiritually, not just intellectually, because right now intellectually they have that knee-jerk reaction. But functionally, though, going back to the topic, what we had this show about, I would say we are in a red scare, and I think that there may be actions taken on that, but I think that there will be a lot of backlash if that does happen. But it appears to me Trump is preparing that way. But for us, we should sit back objectively, observe, do not get upset or disturbed by it, because the truth is with us. And spiritually, I believe that the truth will prevail, both in this country and individually. You decide what is right for you. And for some, it's going to be to leave this place. For others, focus upon preparing yourself and your family for the very worst in this country. I am a firm believer in that.
There was a relevant meme I saw this morning, and I wanted to read it. It's really kind of coincides with everything we're talking about. And so I don't even know who this person is on X. Their name is Tiberius. I wanted to give them credit. But what they said was the following: Western culture is almost entirely devoid of meaning at this point. Everything is designed to pacify, to keep us servile, or to misdirect our innate unhappiness towards other groups to prevent an uprising. That's it. That's Western culture: consumption, subservience, and prejudice. So yeah, who wants to remain in that kind of a situation? It's unhealthy. But there's several thoughts about, what you were saying. Obviously, I think that it's in the interest of the ruling class to placate to an extent, the domestic population. Not all of the domestic population, but some of the domestic population. So they have to insulate us to a point and protect us from the, from the fallout that is likely going to get worse, as they escalate this global war against Russia, against China, etc. But they have to make sure that everybody else feels a lot more pain than the American people do, or they know that at that point they've lost us, and we're gonna there's gonna be an uprising. So they don't have to do a lot, for us, but part of me feels that, there's this need from their perspective to insulate us to a degree. But what else? What else are we? Did you have any additional thoughts on this topic, Christine?
I think that we have covered it very well. I would just say that I don't think people are going to question it until they have suffered a lot more. But even then, I seriously wonder about the majority of Americans. They seem to lack, most of them lack critical thinking skills. They are prone to emotionalism, and thus, as you very well said, can be distracted by their sports and regardless of their lives. And but I think that as people like to identify in this country, left and right, I think the majority are becoming unhappy and disgruntled, and that is good. That is always the seed. But yeah, I think that we have covered this well. Perhaps we might like to explore the breaking news today, as you shared at the beginning of the program.
Okay. Yeah, it was kind of a surprise. I think I might have woken up on Telegram to this idea that, Russia and the United States have been working jointly on a 28-point peace proposal. And the narrative that the media is sharing with us, and it sounds like a sound narrative to me, is that the United States and Russia are in agreement and are wanting to implement this 28-point peace plan, but it's Ukraine and the EU that are reticent, and Trump is going to have to put leverage and pressure on Zelensky to agree to the peace deal, really. And so, to me, I think that's a believable narrative. A lot of people question that narrative, and it's interesting just to see the early thoughts from people on social media. But do you question that narrative, or could you agree with that basic premise that Russia is on board, the U.S. is on board, and both are going to try and pressure the Zelensky and the EU to accept it?
No, no, I do not. I read what they are saying are the leaked 28 plan, that was presented to the Ukrainians. True or not, let's accept it for the sake of this discussion that was it. Number one, since this program has begun, just before it, I believe that the Ukrainians have already stated, I think at the UN or earlier today, a full rejection of Trump's 28-point peace plan. Number two, I would remind you, Billy Bob, that although Trump has presented it as if this is the peace plan that he and Vladimir Putin, the Russians and their envoys had come up with, we don't know that to be a fact at all. Remember, consider the source. It's coming from Trump.
Yeah.
Putin, Peskov, the foreign ministry, none of them have said that this is a peace plan that we as Russians have agreed to. The Russians have not said that. This is something Trump is putting out there. And I would say there are elements in it, certainly, that address Russia's concerns, because everything that Russia said it would achieve by the special military operation will be achieved. I believe that. I do not think that it is going to come from a piece of paper. It would be good, of course, if we could end this. But again, that 28 plan, do not mistake the fact that Trump says it's something written with Russia, that Russia has agreed to it. This is something after their communications that Trump came out with. And I would suspect that it is something to serve Trump's interest. First of all, when you read it, it would benefit the United States capitalist incredibly. It would make Russia supposedly give up hundreds of billions of their foreign investments to the United States and Europe to build Ukraine. It also focused upon bombing, I think, if I don't have it in front of me, of just two cities like Moscow, St. Petersburg or something. No, there cannot be continued attacks whatsoever on Russia. I think it also included something about Russia paying a, quote, kind of like a rental for the area, the Donbass. It sounds very questionable. This is Russia now, Russian territory. And I would also say militarily, Russia is advancing so well. Kupiansk has now been liberated. It appears Odessa, there's more attacks there to perhaps liberate Odessa. And the best ending to this, considering all of the bloodshed and the death of Russians and Ukrainians alike, seems like it's going to be had militarily, not through some peace plan. But Trump presenting this to Zelensky, and Zelensky, of course, as could be expected, rejecting it entirely, serves the purpose for Trump and his, his little image of himself like he's a peacemaker. Now he can say the Ukraine rejected it. I tried. And then, because he sorely wants business with Russia to return and be restored, and of course it would benefit Russia to have normalization, perhaps the U.S. and Russia can then go on without a peace plan per se. I just strongly suspect it will not end with anything like that. This particular plan, the Russians have never said they've agreed to. It certainly shows the U.S. diplomacy finally recognizing some of the key Russian points, but it has already been rejected, regardless of what it was. And Russia has never said that this is a plan that they have agreed to. I just think it has elements of it. It helps Trump's image. And now he may be able to extricate himself and save face and act like this wasn't his war, even though it was, and proceed to perhaps normalize with Russia, and let Russia finish it militarily. And it does still appear that it will be finished militarily.
Yeah, no, I really think that's a great analysis, of course. I the only thing I just differ with, I know we haven't had any official statement from Russia, but it's hard for me to believe that Trump is serving any kind of self-interest by lying about that. If Russia's going to come out and say no, we never had anything to do with it. So, but to your point, I mean, it could be a way of making Trump look good because he is now looking like the peacemaker, and now he's got Zelensky being the anti-peace person, refusing the deal and being irrational and a warmonger, and so he can marginalize Zelensky, and that's all great. But again, I mean, that doesn't preclude Russia from agreeing to this plan. And on the other hand, though, I do agree that a lot of Russians are probably unhappy with the contents because they're feeling after, hundreds of thousands of special military operation deaths that, Odessa needs to be liberated, and, Ukraine ought not to have access to the Black Sea. And I totally support and agree with those sentiments. But ultimately, I'm going to trust the leadership. I'm going to trust Putin to know what is best for Russia. And after Minsk 1 and Minsk 2, I don't think it's within the realm of possibility that he's going to tolerate Minsk 3. And so anything that he's willing to agree to, I have confidence is going to be a good deal and will ultimately work for the benefit of Russia and humanity. But I think it's possible that Russia negotiated these points knowing that they would never be accepted. And so they were willing to do that for the PR purposes and to show the world and to change the dynamic, instead of Russia's the aggressor, it's obviously Zelensky that's the problem. He's the intransigent one and the EU. And so I could definitely see how Russia worked with Trump to roll this out. But if that is the case, I don't know what the point is of distancing Russia from the process. Like, why say no, Russia hasn't agreed to this. So to me, I'm happy to say I think Russia has agreed to this, and it was either for two reasons: because it's a fair, just peace, or because they knew Zelensky would never be able to concede to it. And I realize that my diatribes end very abruptly.
Okay. Well, of course, it's just our speculation. But I think that anyone objectively looking at it, like you just said, would know that Ukraine is going to reject this, and Europe is going to reject it, and then they can proceed. Nevertheless, no, Trump has done this a few times before, proclaiming agreements with Russia, and yet it was not so. It obviously shows a result of the talks that they had. It's definitely finally recognizing some of the key points in the denazification, the government, the troops, non-NATO. So finally, at least it's good to see the United States recognizing that. But it is a moot point because it has been rejected. Now it's a matter of what will happen. And we, like I said, I'm just saying, in terms of Russia's security, and even if this had gone through, which again, hypothetical because it's not, I believe it would fall through. Too much with the governments there, an election within 100 days, I think it said. I just don't see that with the degree of militarization that is currently there, with the degree of terrorism that is happening weekly, sometimes nearly daily inside of Russia proper right now. The assassination attempts on top Russian government officials. I don't see all of that ending. I don't think anything on paper with the United States and Trump as being a mediator would ever solve it. If it did, it'd probably be gone within just a few days. But nevertheless, we look at it right now. Again, simply speculation. It's up to the Russians to decide. And I trust Vladimir Putin. I think he's a fine president for the people, always has been. They know far more than you and I do, and anyone here in the United States does. They know far more than Trump and his people know about what they need. I do read many Russian newspapers, watch Russian television. It's very important to me. It's the country that I love above all others, really. It's a righteous nation. It's providing to me hope to the world. And on this very point, this morning, as I went into some of the chat groups that I read Russians participating, including former military and Russians. No, everybody was like probably the reaction you saw, saying, no, this isn't Russia's plan. Why should Russia, who is the victor in every measure of the word, agree to have hundreds of billions of dollars stolen? Why would they agree to paying them and having investments 50% return to the United States? So Russians are speaking about that. But again, I've never felt it's going to be solved diplomatically, sadly. I feel it will have to be militarily in order to protect Russia from now on. We don't want a 5-month, quote, peace or a 5-year, quote, peace. We want it done with. And frankly, and again, they know more than I do, but frankly, to me, having Odessa liberated and that port closed off from the Westerners arming Ukraine for the future seems to be a necessity, but we'll see what happens.
No, I agree totally with your analysis. It is nice and enjoyable to see, another split between Trump and Zelensky. That's got to put Zelensky in a very awkward situation. The Europeans can't be happy about it. But yeah, what will it ultimately really mean? Maybe nothing. And so it'll be interesting to watch it play out. And yeah, no, I agree. Odessa is super important. How can you trust that the Ukrainians are going to, even if they do agree and say yes, we will, by implementing and making sure that they're not doing all kinds of nefarious things in preparation for another war of their choosing when they feel ready. So yeah, it's very interesting, very topical news item. I mean, everybody is talking about it. I know Danny Haifong is going to have Scott Ritter later today discussing this very same thing. So what else, Christine? What else do we want to talk about? We've hit many topics. Anything at the front of your brain that you wanted to get off your mind or chest?
I would that's quite an open. I would encourage, and I think that this is a good point of why you and I have these conversations, why you have a show on Imperial Decline, is that every single one of us take what you learn from Billy Bob or from me and from the discussions that you have on Facebook, and be quite bold in sharing that with others. The United States, to me, is a dead man walking. I am not, and people say, well, that's pessimistic. I feel it is realistic. Let's at the very least say it's going to get much worse before it might ever get better. I think the most important, if I was talking to every single one who is watching right now, just as a friend, and we were sitting there talking, I would say, be aware, be knowledgeable of all of this. But the most important thing you can do is to focus upon your life, your well-being, and your provision. Because if indeed Trump proceeds with his warmongering, his attacks, again, going back to the Red Scare, he's going to use that same kind of talk against Venezuela. He's talking about the entire Western Hemisphere with his Department of War appropriately named again, finally. Taking on the whole Western Hemisphere, and that there's no place for socialist countries in the Western Hemisphere. As he acts upon it, if he acts upon it, well, then it's going to become very worse for your average American and your life. First of all, Americans may lose their lives. And in the military, I'm talking about. And the U.S. military really doesn't care. The United States government, Trump doesn't care. I suspect strongly he doesn't care about human life. He's proven that time and again. But there may be U.S. military deaths if he does take military action, for example, in Venezuela or elsewhere. But they don't care. The Pentagon actually measures military interventions in terms of loss, in terms of equipment lost, not human life lost. But every one of those human lives are going to have a family and friends in this country. Might be a small number, but it'll affect them, and then they will share that. It may begin that unrest. I do not believe, and I certainly hope, but I don't believe that Trump is going to be successful to continue this absolutely wild, out of control, irrational hatred and bullying of the world. But in the interim, as he does, life is going to get harder in the United States. And the most important thing you can do, you can have all your knowledge up here, but the most important thing that every one of us can do is to provide for ourselves and our family. Don't let your internet debates, for example, go to the extreme that an hour or two of your life is spent there, when that hour or two might have been better spent considering the worst case scenario. Consider no electricity for weeks or months on end. Consider a cut. Look what happened with that, whatever that program is called about food, and how people were just packing the grocery stores to get what they could and then going to food banks. Well, consider that right now instead of being surprised. Don't rely upon the U.S. government for a thing in your life. Consider you were alone and the people you love and care for, and you need to provide for them for a month, 2 months minimum, certainly far more than that. Start giving some thought to that, and that would be my advice to everyone. And as far as Trump goes, I'm a Christian. I feel that he is not only as a man, and it's hard to say this considering the presidents that this country has had, is probably the most ignorant man as president, and stupid. And I don't say those as just derogatory terms, but accurate terms. When he speaks, he seems to know nothing about world geography. He knows nothing about world history. He can conflate things that are completely unrelated. I just consider him to be, frankly, anti-God, and I mean this by the values that Christ taught, anti-Christ, and truly anti-American. And yet he cloaks himself in America and the flag, and all of these fundamentalist Christians, they surround him, and none of them are looking at what his ego is leading him to do, which truly threatens all of the United States, certainly our economic standing, but everything else. So just think about your life and those that you love, because as someone with critical thinking, apply it to your own life, because you can't control what Trump's going to do, what this government is going to do, but you can control being ready. And as that government shutdown showed, almost no Americans are.
So that's really sound advice, and I couldn't agree more. The thing that is most stimulating to me is just how people process what is going on. How they rationalize it, how they perceive it. And, I think a lot of Americans don't really even think about it or consider it. But the ones that do, they just fall into all these different little ideological ways of understanding it. And they're all different. So, Democrat voters see it through an anti-Trump lens, and if only we had the Democrats in power. Whereas the Trump supporters are going to think, hey, Trump's doing a great job. It's it's the Democrats that are dragging our country down. And then you have libertarians, for instance, and anarchists, or anarchist light, and they think of things in the state is bad, authoritarianism is bad. We want volunteerism and no state, and that's that's the worldview that they process the events and what's going on. And then there's liberals, liberals who are unhappy with the illiberalism of Trump, and they like, well, we need to be more liberal. But I think all of these different perspectives miss exactly what's going on. And at the center, the most fundamental thing about what is going on is understanding class dynamic and understanding that actual democracy and progress for humanity involves democracy, and it involves a government that represents the working class. And we just have never really had that in this country and in the Western world. It's always been an oligarchy. It's been a dictatorship of the capitalist class. And that is kind of the liberating truth that allows people to really understand what's going on and then base their advocacy on that reality instead of these idealistic things about, well, I just trust Trump, or, well, I just hate Trump, or, we just need to be less authoritarian, So this is the thing that is most interesting and stimulating to me is trying to reach people and trying to explain to people about the centrality of class so that they can properly, in my opinion, process all these things that are going on. But it's a struggle, and then you can beat your head against the wall because people aren't really open to new information or to questioning what they believe and why they believe it. Everything's a debate about winning and not really about finding out what is true and correct. But we plan on, me and you, Christine, every other Friday, we're going to convene our 2-person roundtable. And hopefully, we'll have a number of shows going forward, always, with specific topics, but it's going to be free ranging and we're going to go any direction we want, like we did today. Is there any final thought? Or I don't even have to say final thought. I mean, if you want to talk for another 50 minutes about anything, I'm more than happy to. But I know we've been going about an hour. So what are your thoughts?
Just one, per what you were just saying before your wrap up. Yes, the American people have ceased to think of themselves in classes. And unless they will always go to their preferred political candidate as if there's an answer, instead of seeing really there's just 2 classes. There's the ruling class, and then there's the rest of us. And all we do is work for them to steal our money and use it for their power, their hegemony worldwide. We do not benefit. But none of them, Democrat, Republican alike, almost no one that we meet thinks of themselves as a class, lower class, middle class, upper class. That's even gone. And the fact is, the U.S. government has made it. We don't have middle class, upper class. Almost everybody, where of course there's variations, but everyone, what they are accustomed to generally is suffering now, but people don't think of it as a class division. So they never think that they're Democrat people that they esteem or they're Republican people that they esteem are the enemy, when really it is them against us. And nobody perceives it that way. They don't see it. They also reject the idea of good and evil. And I think spiritually, if they don't even begin to perceive all of this through that lens, they will always succumb to thinking they have an answer in a politician within this system. They're never going to question the system unless they step outside of it and view it objectively as we do. But it's been a good show. And yes, we're going to be doing this every other Friday, and we're going to have some very interesting topics. I've had a number of people I know already suggesting topics. I have quite a few. Billy Bob and I are going to be working on that. we're always open to hearing from you and with your input and topics you would like to see he and I discuss. And Billy Bob, it's been a good show and I've enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christine. So yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting up again the Friday after next. We topic yet undecided, but yeah. And you know, it's just important. I think it's important to have these conversations. I don't think the American public gets, you know, talks about these things enough. Certainly the news isn't helpful. And so, no, we have to broaden the window of discussion. I mean, instead of just, you know, partisan political theater, which is what typically passes for political discussion, we need to open up the Overton window and you know, discuss class, and you know, that's fundamental in just actually understanding reality. So yeah, I feel like I'm just being repetitive at this point, but Christine, thank you so much. We will reconvene Friday after next, so we will see everyone then. Thank you very much.